So I am super tired today, almost to like Esau drama or dramatic uh, overreaction of being tired. I'll sell you my birthright for a nap. But super excited to be here with you guys, and I did take a nap, but I didn't do enough. So we're going to be discussing Job today with the talk of the Leviathan and the Behemoth, and I'm like, these are some of my favorite verses, and I almost struggled a little bit because it was like, well, what are we gonna, like, how are we gonna do this? What are we gonna talk about in for this week's episode? And so I started going towards conservation. I was like, I'm gonna do a conservation episode, and I was like, I really want to hold off because I'm trying to go with like ancient hunting tactics and like trying to keep that mindset for this year's series. And so I was like, man, like I could use it because the application of like early on conservation and different things, and was trying to tie in a few different ideas and stuff, and I got a really good like core base built for that episode, but I really want to hold on to that one for another time, like maybe next year or maybe even the year after. But the reason why I'm not wanting to talk that yet is because I want to stick to this theme, and it's been a challenge because it's like, is there really that much that you can talk about hunting wise in the Bible? And the answer is yes, you can, because there's so much around it. Like, you can talk about being a good steward, which is kind of like where we might end up going with conservation. You can talk about the history of hunting, like we've been trying to do on this series, where we get a better idea of how they lived and trying to tie it into verses and stuff. And today we get to combine three of my favorite things: the Bible. We also get to combine that with hunting, but also D&D, aka Dungeons and Dragons. And so that being said, I really think today's episode is going to be a fun one. I don't know if anybody else has really been enjoying these past couple episodes, but I most certainly have. This hunting series has been fun for me, and definitely has continued to help me get in the hunting mood for this fall. And I'm ready to get out there and ready to start getting after them. Hunting does so much good for me because a lot of times I get out there and I start writing because it's like, okay, everything's chill, there's no animals coming, it's really quiet, I can work on a book. And here lately I've been trying to work on for 2 years now, I've been trying to work on a book about being a blue collar guy, for lack of better words, a blue collar man, blue collar husband, whatever, person, whatever, but Christian. There you go, blue collar Christian, because that's the whole premise of like service and trying to be okay with like where you're at with being in that job description and everything. And that it's good to be working with our hands, that it keeps us busy, and it's meaningful work. We're doing something for the community, but how can we be lights while doing it? Those are kind of like the angles that I try to take at it. And getting out there and getting in the woods, I get to do that with a little less stress. My schedule this year is crazy. So, like, writing has not been at the forefront, at least in the same sense as what it was, because I've changed things up. I've started podcasting. I've started working on some tabletop gaming stuff. let's get into it. We are going to go to Job chapter 40 first, and we're going to start in verse 15. Behold, Behemoth, which I made as I made you, he eats grass like an ox. Behold his strength in his loins, and his power in the muscles of his belly. He makes his tail stiff like a cedar. The sinews of his thighs are knit together. His bones are tubes of bronze. His limbs like bars of iron. Let him who made him bring near his sword. For the mountains yield food for him, where all the wild beasts play. Under the lotus plants he lies, in the shelter of the reeds and in the marsh. For his shade the lotus trees cover him. The willows of the brook surround him. Behold, if the river is turbulent, he is not frightened. He is confident, though Jordan rushes against his mouth. Can one take him by his eyes, or pierce his nose with a snare? So I read recently a thing, it was a paleontology book on giant rhinoceroses, and it actually said that there's obviously a little bit of a theory that it could have been a giant rhinoceros, but it could have been several things. Could have been a brontosaurus, I think is the correct name for it. And we have proof that dinosaurs and man lived together. We've got footprints in limestone, side by side. We've got cave paintings. But can you imagine trying to hunt those creatures? Obviously, here God is talking about how great this creature is. It's a massive creature, and it's not afraid. It's the mountains yield food for him. Eats a lot of food. Behold, if the river is turbulent, he is not frightened. He is confident, rushes against his mouth. So, thirsty feller. But, did they use drive techniques for that? Did they, can one take him by his eyes or pierce his nose with a snare? Apparently he had pretty tough skin too, which rhinos do actually. So there was a lot of archery work done over in Africa that trying to figure out what the best grains would be for bow hunting. Things the bigger animals, water buffalo, and so on and so forth. Thicker skins, real tough things to kill with a bow and arrow, and what kind of grain you would need for that. And it definitely sparked a really interesting conversation in shooting a heavier grain arrow to get better pass through and different things like that. Which I'm a firm believer in a heavier arrow. Okay, yeah, Dr. Ashby. I couldn't remember the guy's name. So he went through a whole thing of building basically anywhere from a 700 grain all the way up to a 1200 grain arrow. And just to read you this isn't a full-on article, that's a forum through or a paper through Colorado Parks and Wildlife from E. Ashby. It's a 13-page study update. Another one, Journal of Mountain Hunting, Arrow Lethality, Part 5 by Dr. Ed Ashby. Combinations of number 6 and 7 are lighter arrows, 654 and 650 grains at the same velocity, which honestly, that's about where mine are. I'm not quite touching 7 yet. And that's still, compared to, a lot of arrows out there today, that's still a heavy arrow. And for, deer, that's gonna get you through there pretty good. Plus, I've had some shoulder issues and stuff like that, so I shoot a crossbow, so I get a little bit more foot per second with that. Although, like, shooting a crossbow, or not a crossbow, a compound bow, again, is definitely something that I want to do. But the whole point of this is talking to kind of start segueing to, like, what kind of arrow would you need to get through that thick skin of, like, something like a behemoth? So you would need about a 1250 grain arrow, essentially, to shoot, or like to effectively kill a rhinoceros. So that's a heavy arrow. And I mean, you get that thing launched. I mean, think about, like, the momentum behind something. So 1,250 grains is double, or a little over double what I'm shooting. So something that's that heavy, moving that fast from an arrow, or like from a bow, is pretty impressive, because it's gonna have the weight, the driving weight is what you're really trying to get for that. And so you're looking to get, obviously, a clean shot, because you want to hit something vital so it doesn't run off. You're wanting to have a ethical kill. My brain is tired, so it took me a minute there, but you're wanting to have an ethical kill. So all these things that you need to consider when you're shooting, and that's why practicing is so important and everything else. I actually come across a deer that a buddy gave to me this past winter that had an infection. Once I got into processing the animal, I noticed some blood that was, like, dried on the outside of the muscle, and I thought, okay, a little weird, because it got hit up front, maybe an old bow hunting wound or something like that. I cut into the meat because I was going to break it down to cube it to grind up for ground deer, and as my knife slid into the tissue, I smelled it first, and it was very just potent and sour. And as soon as I smelled it, I went, "Oh no!" And my wife and my son were like, "What?" And I already knew without even seeing it what the issue was, and so I flipped it up and I looked in there, and I could see just the nasty, mucusy looking green pus, and it was such a bummer. But that's why you want to have good shots. I never did come across the broadhead, but you want the animal to die well and to not be in pain and to not have, these issues, infections, and so on and so forth. For those of you who aren't hunters that are watching this or listening to this, we're not out there being, cruel, horrible, torturing animals or anything like that. We are doing it for sport. We are doing it for food. We are doing it because we love it. It's a cleaner, healthier cut of meat, as opposed to something that's been processed and fed, GMOs and all this other junk that get pumped into animals, which I love beef and I love chicken, but cleaner options of meat is fantastic. And honestly, if you ask my family, I definitely think everybody in my house gets excited whenever we're talking about having duck for dinner, whenever we're talking about having deer for dinner, because it tastes great. And I can attest to that because we just recently had duck and deer for dinner and for, meals in general here as of late. And it's something that we look forward to. It does cut down on grocery costs too. There's a lot of good things behind it, but we're going to move on to the Leviathan, which actually, plugging my other show here for a minute, on Tin Roof, we talked about the album by Mastodon, Leviathan, which is about Moby Dick. So if you're a fan of like old school literature and you like hard rock, definitely check out the Leviathan album, and also check out the Tin Roof podcast episode. But we're going to go over to 41 real quick, and we're gonna read. We're just gonna read a handful of verses, starting with verse 1. Can you draw out Leviathan with a fishhook, or press down its tongue with a cord? Can you put a rope into his nose, or pierce his jaw with a hook? Will he make many pleas to you? Will he speak to you soft words? Will he make a covenant with you to take him for your servant forever? Will you play with him as with a bird, or will you put him on a leash for your girls? Will traders bargain over him? Will they divide him up among the merchants? Can you fill his skin with harpoons, or his head with fishing spears? Lay your hands on him. Remember the battle, you will not do it again. Behold, the hope of a man is false. He is laid low even at the sight of him. No one is so fierce that he dares to stir him up. Who then is he who can stand before me? Think about the creatures that are still currently on this planet that we can visibly see. Rhinoceroses, mountain lions, grizzly bears. Grizzly bear could have been a behemoth. I mean, you look at an animal that is an unstoppable force. Grizzly bears is about as unstoppable as they get. You gotta shoot them with just to deter them, you gotta shoot them with like a heavy bullet. That's not to kill. That's just to like get them to not bother you and to go another direction. I mean, you hit them with something small, they're not even gonna feel it. Like, grizzly bears are the ultimate beast. They are incredible creatures and a testament to God's creation, for sure. Every animal is, obviously. We spend a lot of time talking about. So those are our current creatures that just, alone speak testament to God's, creation. But then, if you took it a step further, okay, this thing was a monster. So, rope in his nose or pierce his jaw with a hook. Here we go, a little bit further down. Who can strip off his outer garment? Who would come near him with a bridle? So a bridle is the piece that goes into. Well, that's the bit part, but it goes around and attaches to the bit. But it's to control, for a horse. Who can open the doors of his face? Around his teeth is terror. His back is made of rows of shields. So people have, kind of pointed towards stegosauruses. They're shut up closely as with a seal. So that makes me think of if you think of Greek combat, the phalanx where the shields are overlapping. They are joined to one another. They clasp each other and cannot be separated. His sneezings flash forth light, and his eyes are like the eyelids of dawn. Out of his mouth go flaming torches. Sparks of fire leap forth. Out of his nostrils comes forth smoke, as from a boiling pot and burning rushes. His breath kindles coals, and a flame comes forth from his mouth. Okay, so it sounds like a dragon. And all the talk of fish hooks and stuff like that, perhaps aquatic, but I mean, people, the term dinosaur wasn't around until the late 1800s, early 1900s, and so that's a new term. Until that, it was dragons, and so yeah, dragons could have for real existed. I mean, there's a dragon in every single ancient civilization's mythology, embedded deep in the lore. And so yeah, could there have been like what we know as dinosaurs have been dragons potentially? And like, think about how crazy that is. To think that, there's just creatures out there breathing fire and whatnot that are, ancestors, the people that we read about in the Bible had to deal with. Like, we focus on lion hunting and everything else. Like, what about the dudes like pre-flood? Because you got to remember, Job was written, Job's the oldest book in the Bible. So if you think about, like, let's say the dudes before the flood having to deal with that, like, that's wild. Because obviously, like, the first big hunter that we mention is Nimrod. But, like, if you think about the guys that were before that, that's hard to wrap your head around. And so, what kind of tactics did they, use for those? Like, I think about, playing D&D, all the different weapons that you use in there: swords, arrows, tridents, morning stars, mauls, halberds, glaives, all these different things. And it's like, did they use those? And the part about, like, not wanting anything to do with him after, like, if you go to hunt him or fight him or whatever, it's gonna be a battle, and you're gonna feel it. You like people who have done it are like, nope, I'm done. Like, that thought process is crazy to think about. So this this powerful creature was created by our God, and it shows obviously His majesty, much like we were referring to with the grizzly bear. And the whole point here is to take these thoughts and to think about, to apply the thought of, okay, how would they have hunted these? And it's kind of more of like a fun speculation point from that aspect. Obviously, we're not adding to God's word, but to just have a fun moment of, like, what if, or like, how did they do that, and kind of put ourselves in their shoes. Like, obviously, a creature like that, you're probably going to want to play, 1, the wind, 2, you're going to want to have surprise, 3, like brontosauruses or whatever, probably going to, like, if that's what it was, for the behemoth, you're probably going to want to do the drive method, or even, like, potentially, we have evidence of tar pits and everything like that. Maybe, somehow lure it to a tar pit if you're not driving it towards a tar pit. Traps and all different kinds of methods to stop one of these creatures. But think about how long you could eat off of these things, or how many people you could feed with one of these. Like, stakes were high, and here in America, and this is like something that we could talk about in a conservation episode for sure. Here in America, we had people that hunted for food for themselves, but they were also like commercial hunters, like, because we didn't have the livestock setup that we have today. Obviously, we had some livestock, but a lot of your meat came from commercial hunters. So, like, they were doing crazy stuff like loading cannons full of forks and different things to kill waterfowl. And just look at the buffalo and how they hunted that to extinction just because they wanted the land. And man has gotten in the way of God's creation several times. And a stewardship through conservation episode is gonna be awesome whenever we do finally get to that point. But until then, think about God's word and hunting, and how big of a blessing that is, and what our forefathers had to go through to provide for their families and different things. It wasn't as easy as going to work and earning a paycheck and then coming home and bringing home the bacon, so to speak. They brought home the bacon, but it was in a much different way. yeah, just totally different. That's about all we have time for this week. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us and discussing God's Word for a little bit. This episode definitely ended up being more scatterbrained than what I had, thought it would be. I felt more streamlined with it, but hopefully you enjoyed it and you were able to get something out of it. Till next week.